Joining me now is Democratic Congresswoman Sara from California, who serves on the House Foreign Affairs and Armed Services Committees and also is the youngest Jewish member of Congress. Congresswoman, thank you so much for being here tonight. First off, I know that you have family in Israel. How are they doing tonight?
Well, thank you so much for asking. I'm really glad that my cousin and her 3 kids, including an 18-month-old who's had to spend nights in the bomb shelter, have been able to leave Israel. I have one more cousin who is still staying in Tel Aviv for the time being, but so far, despite some air raids and some time in the bomb shelter, she is safe.
Okay, so she is safe tonight?
Yes, thank you for asking.
Of course, we wanted to make sure. I know that has been obviously a big priority for you. And you heard from President Biden tonight in these comments with 60 Minutes. You know, he's warning Israel, saying that he doesn't believe reoccupying Gaza would be a good idea. What did you make of those comments? And do you believe that he should take Netanyahu up on that offer to travel to Israel?
Look, I think President Biden is exactly right. Having family there who are still in harm's way, I understand how important it is to make sure that Israel is doing everything it can to defend its people, to root out Hamas, to try and get the hostages, and Hamas should give up the hostages. But the fact of the matter is we're stronger when we lead with our values and when we protect civilian life. And we have seen from our own efforts in Iraq and Afghanistan that long-term occupation, population-wide kind of military incursions just haven't actually been effective or successful. And I don't think it makes sense for Israel's long-term safety and security.
And do you believe that he should go and visit?
I think he should visit when the time is right. I know, having worked in many emergency and conflict situations myself, it's always a big lift when a big principal comes. It's important for them to show their support, but it also takes a lot of resources away from the front lines. And so I know that his team is working on those deliberations right now.
Yeah, the White House says nothing to confirm at this time. Obviously, Congressman, you were working to help Americans who wanted to leave Israel in recent days, were struggling to do so as commercial airlines were canceling flights. What is the latest on those efforts? And have you also heard from Americans who were in Gaza, who were trying to get out and unable, struggling to do so with no really diplomatic or humanitarian corridors being established yet?
Yeah, the State Department came together really quickly, and I'm grateful for everything they've done to help get families like mine out of Israel. There are now flights going. If any American citizen is trying to get out of Israel or Gaza, there's a form they can fill out on the State Department website, and they should get information very quickly about how to get on those charter flights. But I've also been hearing from Americans in Gaza about how difficult the situation is and how unable they have been about getting any information. So I led an effort to work with the State Department to try and make sure we're upholding our values of serving Americans wherever they are. I'm glad that this crisis intake form on the State Department website now includes Israel and Gaza. And I'm hopeful by the news that American citizens will be able to leave through the Rafah crossing gate into Egypt. And we're going to continue working with the administration to get every American who wants to leave out.
The U.S. has been trying to persuade Israel to open up a humanitarian corridor that would let aid in, let people out. They've also been trying to make a deal to open the Rafah crossing, which, of course, has had its own challenges as well. But do you fear that they're running out of time, these nations that are working together, to get this done before that potential ground incursion does happen?
I'm very concerned about the situation on the ground. Like, I completely understand, having family there still in Israel, the urgency that the Israeli military feels in moving quickly, and they should be doing everything they can to try and get the hostages, to make sure that they are taking out Hamas. And we are strongest when we lead with our values, and we are seeing immense human suffering in Gaza. I was very proud that President Biden has been emphasizing the law of war and humanitarian access in all of his conversations with the Israeli government, and that has led directly to water being turned back on in southern Gaza. And there's still a lot more we'll need to do to make sure that the humanitarian situation there is tenable as Israel does what they should be doing, which is going to try and get the hostages and taking out Hamas's leadership.
You sit on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Congresswoman. The Rafah border crossing that I mentioned has so far remained closed. There's questions about whether or not it's going to open tonight. This obviously, they're not letting any critical supplies go back and forth. As you know, the U.S. gives Egypt a lot of aid money each year. What should the ramifications be if Egypt doesn't help?
Look, I think it's important that we get the Rafah crossing open, and I'm glad that Secretary Blinken has had those conversations with President Sisi, is doing the shuttle diplomacy that is so important in this time. You know, I think this is a really difficult situation where you want to make sure humanitarian goods are getting in, people can get out, while also recognizing that you want to make sure you're doing it in a safe and orderly and humane way, and that you're doing it in such a way that it protects against Hamas being able to get out, or any sort of war material being able to get in. And that is difficult because so many things can be used for multiple purposes. And so I know that Secretary Blinken and the entire U.S. government is working hard on those negotiations, and I'm hopeful that we will see a breakthrough soon.
We got an update from the State Department that you bring up there tonight that it is now 30 Americans, 30, that were killed in this attack by Hamas. 13 more Americans are still unaccounted for tonight. What went through your mind when you heard that latest number?
I mean, it's just heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. It's horrifying. I condemn in the strongest terms Hamas's brutal and inexcusable attack. And I think Israel has the right to do everything it needs to do to protect its citizens and to make sure that something like this can never happen again, while upholding the international rule of law and protecting civilians. And, you know, my heart just goes out to everyone who is grieving. I think about my family, and I am so grateful that they are safe. But it could just have easily been them. Sha'ar Negev, the community on the border where so many of these atrocities happened, is actually San Diego's sister city. And so I've spent a lot of time there, spent time as a teenager there, meeting with folks, meeting with the Israeli Arabs who live nearby. And it's just so heartbreaking and infuriating, everything that is happening and the atrocities that we're seeing.
Congress obviously is headed back to Washington this week. There is still no House Speaker. House Republicans went home last week without anyone. Obviously, you are a Democrat, but as you're looking at your Republican colleagues and what we're seeing happen right now with Jim Jordan in this desperate effort to try to get him enough votes, he's not there yet. Obviously, this has consequences, especially when it comes to aid for Israel, which we've seen, officials in the White House say they're running out of runway for that. That is going to be something that Congress needs to deal with soon. Are you confident that your Republican colleagues can get this done this week so Congress doesn't remain paralyzed?
Look, House Democrats are united behind Hakeem Jeffries. We've got 212 votes for him, and we've been having both public and private conversations with Republicans about our willingness and openness for a bipartisan way forward. And I'm hopeful that some Republicans will take us up on that because, frankly, the idea of Jim Jordan as Speaker, someone who actively worked with President Trump to undermine the election in 2020, who has done so many other awful things, I think is simply untenable. And this is critical. We need to get a speaker so that we can pass necessary legislation. It is becoming an issue of national security. And I know that we are all eager to have those conversations about what a bipartisan way forward can look like.
If they put forward a more moderate Republican, would you consider crossing the aisle to vote for that person?
I think that will have to be part of a larger conversation around what kind of bipartisan way forward there is, what kind of coalition it could look like. It would have to involve some rules changes to make sure that we don't get into the same mess again in a few weeks. But I do think that there is real openness and willingness among House Democrats to have those conversations.
Congresswoman Sara Jacobs, we are so grateful that your family in Israel is doing well. Please tell them that we're thinking of them. And thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.